Left 4 Dead is filled to the brim with unsolved mysteries. From dark analog horror to cryptids and nightmare mods, this series has it all. Many of you enjoyed my first Unsolved Mystery series, so like I said in the last video, I wanted to come back, but in a slightly different way. This is the third video on the Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg I created, so if you haven't seen the other two, go give them a watch. This video will be covering layers 5 and 6, so best to say there'll be a couple interesting entries in today's video. Just in case you don't know how an iceberg video works, it's an iceberg cut into various layers, with the ones at the top being relatively known by the community, but as you make your way down, the topics will get darker and less familiar. I showed it briefly in my last video, but like I said, I did make this iceberg myself. Some of the entries were taken from other charts. For example, shout out to the ultimate Left 4 Dead iceberg, I grabbed some from there. Check them out down in the description. Before we jump into the video, if you enjoy this content and like what I do, please consider subscribing. At 40,000 subscribers, I have something extremely special planned, so stay tuned. As always, if this video reaches 1,000 likes, I'll post some baby bunny pictures on my community tab. But with all that out of the way, let's dive straight into the depths of the Unsolved Mystery Iceberg, explained. The first entry on the 5th layer is titled Left 4 Dead 2 Retconned Left 4 Dead 1. Many of you might have not realized this happened, so let me explain. In the original game, the Left 4 Dead 1 special infected were supposed to be the only specials at that point in the timeline. Only by the time of Left 4 Dead 2 did the green flu mutate to create more specials like the Jockey, Spitter, and Charger. Canonically, at the time our survivors walked through the streets of No Mercy, they would have never seen a Jockey or a Charger. The only campaign they probably did see them in would be the Sacrifice, as that's the farthest point in the timeline because it crosses over with the beginning of the second game. Some of you might be saying, but wait, Cookie, don't they have voice lines talking about the new specials in campaigns like No Mercy? And you'd be correct. But all those details and assets were placed into the original once Left 4 Dead 2 came out to accommodate all the new features, thus retconning a portion of the lore. There's two other smaller details, the CEDA agents and bile jars. Both weren't originally in Left 4 Dead 1 and are just more examples of the second game shoving its features into the first. CEDA definitely was active during the events of the first game, they were just never added until Left 4 Dead 2 came out, so they can get a pass. However, bile jars were something specifically created later on once the government had time to analyze the boomer. So once again, canonically, we wouldn't ever find any bile jars within the majority of the Left 4 Dead 1 campaigns. I want to make it clear that I don't think these features are bad in any way. Heck, the game would be a lot more boring without them, but their introduction into the first game retcons some of the lore, and in other cases just doesn't make any sense. Let me know what you guys think of this, but let's move to the next section. Cryptid tall tales is the next entry. This entry refers to the abundance of cryptid tall tales within the Left 4 Dead community. These tales could range from anything like weird looking infected to demonic creatures following players inside the game. It's a bit of a broader entry, so let me give you a specific example that I've personally had. A long time ago in my first ever Unsolved Mysteries video, I told the story of what I called the Death Toll sewer monster. Long story short, when I was a kid, I always thought there was some creature lurking in the sewers of Death Toll. This was probably because I was just naive or had seen some YouTube video, but after I told that story, I got hundreds of comments on that video of people telling me their own cryptid tall tales. They're interesting to entertain and talk about purely because it puts you in the mind of someone who hasn't really played the game. Maybe they were just misinformed, but that curiosity and wonder is what makes those player-to-player interactions so incredible. The most common stories I do see are similar to the Death Toll sewer monster. They're either some super rare special infected or some creature that follows the player around. Aside from that, the reason I put the words tall tales next to the cryptid part is because as an enthusiast of Left 4 Dead, I like to entertain these stories by suspending my disbelief, which makes enjoying them for what they are a lot more satisfying. Sound affects the infection. This seems to be a smaller theory within the Left 4 Dead community. At first, I didn't know what to think, so I messaged my friend Payne about it, and he articulated it pretty well, so I'll read what he sent me first, then I'll add on after. Quote, okay, I'm not really sure what you mean about sound affecting the infection, but one of the specific theories I've heard is that one of the chemicals in your body, probably adrenaline, is actually tied to how quickly you are infected by the green flu, because obviously to an extent the virus taps into that, causing rage and extreme strength/energy, which can almost certainly be a result of adrenaline. Not to mention, in the church, obviously the guy is not fine, but he's doing pretty well until he begins ringing the bell. Then boom, he's infected. Now it could be a coincidence that the survivors arrived as soon as he turned, or it was the actual ringing of the bell that causes his transformation. In my opinion, that's definitely up to your interpretation. And then the last piece of evidence that we could see is sort of disjointed, but the idea is that the people in the hotel during Dead Center were human until the helicopter arrived, which is allowed loud noise, and then they all quickly turned, becoming infected. Because it's clear the helicopter left in a hurry, but why would it have touched down at all if the infected had already taken over the hotel? Obviously, the people in the hotel weren't scaling the walls, because if they were, they would have been on top of the hotel. Windows would have been broken where they entered, which they weren't, meaning it's possible the people in there transformed as a result of the helicopter's sound itself. Again, it's very reliant on your own perspective, but that's the gist of the theories I've heard." End quote. Personally, I'm not too sure I believe this theory. On one hand, it makes sense, but the rapid infection could just be explained by the green flu itself, without necessarily needing sound. The most interesting thing he brings up is the helicopter at the beginning of Dead Center. I always assumed the people were already turned or turning, and the pilot was just waiting for any last survivors to escape. It's an interesting thought experiment, but there's not an incredible amount of tangible evidence. Most of the evidence is very circumstantial, but let me know what you guys think. Disembodied voices. This refers to the weird, unexplained voices you can sometimes hear in the Left 4 Dead campaigns. It might not happen all the time, but players report that throughout a lot of the campaigns you can hear what sounds like people mumbling, talking, or even crying, but you can never actually see them. I've only ever experienced this once, and you can recreate it for yourself. If you go to the 4th chapter of the parish and sit at the top of these stairs, turn your volume all the way up and wait. You'll eventually hear what sounds like a girl sobbing. I do want to warn you though, jets will be bombing the city as you stand here, so just prepare your ears to be exploded a couple times. You can check the attic, nearby rooms, and other buildings, but you'll never find a physical source for this noise, hence why I've called them disembodied. People in the comments have told me you can hear audio like this on other campaigns. If I remember correctly, people have told me Swamp Fever also has these strange voices. Unfortunately, I can't find the comments nor the strange noise when I explore the campaign, so if you have any information, please let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear it for myself. While writing the script for this video, one of my mods gave me this clip of what seems to be someone laughing. Keep in mind this isn't my gameplay. I asked if he had any mods installed that would be making this noise, and he said he didn't. The most reasonable explanation for some of these voices are people who were left for dead. I'm sorry, but for real this time, people who were left behind during the infection. Some argue it's more paranormal in nature, and due to the strangeness of these voices, I can't necessarily disagree, but maybe we'll find an explanation one day. Purple Francis. Oh boy, where do I even start with this one? Purple Francis was a meme within the Left 4 Dead community for a while. I can't quite describe it myself, so let me read you an excerpt from the Left 4 Dead fan in wiki. Quote, "Purple Francis is a playable character in Left 4 Dead. He looks mostly like the character Francis, but he has a purple hue to him. He owned a root beer factory before the apocalypse and had 3 children and a wife. Purple Francis doesn't really show much character outside of small conversations and reactions to the other survivors dying." End quote. I wouldn't go as far to say Purple Francis was a cryptid. If we continue reading the wiki entry, it becomes abundantly clear that yes, it was a joke. Quote, "Purple Francis was originally not meant to be a playable character, but after Mark Laidlaw, writer for the Half-Life series, requested he be put into the game, the developers of Left 4 Dead put him into the game, which is regarded as Turtle Rock Studios' best move at the time. Purple Francis at first received a negative reaction for at first looking as if he was just a recolored Francis. The reaction soon turned positive when he spoke for the first time. It was reported that approximately 10 people passed out at the first hearing of his voice." End quote. While it's fun to joke about this Purple fucking Francis guy, researching the topic for the script has been a wild ride. At first, I couldn't tell if people were taking this seriously or not. Ultimately, he's just a fake 5th survivor. You can find mods in the workshop, but it's nothing too interesting.
Hey guys, it's Payne here. Cookie told me if I ever want to see my family again, I'd have to do another section. So, here I am. This next section, titled "The Military in Left 4 Dead 1 is the National Guard," posits that the military we encounter in the first Left 4 Dead is not the United States regular forces, but the state-run National Guardsmen. As you play through Left 4 Dead 1, I encourage you to take note of the equipment being used by the military. We find M60s scattered around the maps, a weapon that was taken out of service in the early 1990s. This signals one of two things. Either the military is utilizing its outdated surplus weaponry, or the National Guard is the entity we see fighting the infection in the game. The latter is more likely for multiple reasons. One, the soldiers we see in the game are lacking any sort of combat armor. They're equipped with their camo uniforms, and that's it. The Humvees in Left 4 Dead 1 also all utilize a specific camo pattern, a woodland camouflage. Military vehicles of the time were being painted with a desert camouflage, due to the fact that the greater armed forces were engaged in combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. If we take a look at small arms weaponry throughout the games, you'll also notice the M16A2, which for one reason or another fires fully auto, more like the M16A3. This weapon was largely phased out in the early 2000s. And finally, at the end of Blood Harvest, the survivors are picked up by the National Guard in a Finnish XA-180 armored personnel carrier, which appears to have been retrofitted for biohazard operations. The National Guard is often given outdated weaponry or previously phased out weaponry, as their role is traditionally to put down civil unrest or act as federal law enforcement in times of unrest. Compare the weaponry we see in Left 4 Dead 1 to the military presence in Left 4 Dead 2, and you'll notice that we don't see the regular armed forces until the Parish campaign. The military utilized fighter jets like the FA-18 Raptor and the CH-53E Sea Stallion, two relatively modern vehicles equipped with weaponry that far outpaces the military in the first game. This is likely why we see the military being crushed by the infection until it's too late.
The next entry on my list is Half-Life and Left 4 Dead Are Connected. Personally, I don't think they are, but let's dive into some of the reasons players might think that way. The biggest one I see floating around is the fact that all these games are made by Valve. That's literally it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but just because games are made by the same developer doesn't mean they have to be in the same universe. There are other theories. For example, many point out that the outbreak in Left 4 Dead could have originated from the Black Mesa facility. Now, while I've played the first Half-Life game, I'm not incredibly well versed in the universe of Half-Life, so correct me if I say anything wrong. From what I see online, the Black Mesa incident, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's this huge snowball effect where the main character Gordon Freeman and his fellow scientists cause a resonance cascade, which is just fancy wording for boom, huge explosion, alien invasion is now happening. This takes place possibly around the year 2000, but I see different sources citing different years, so it might take place slightly before or after. Now let's focus our attention back to Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead takes place in 2008-2009. It's possible Left 4 Dead could be an alternate timeline of the Half-Life universe where the resonance cascade event never took place, and instead the scientists at Black Mesa continued experimenting on the aliens. Those experiments could have given us the green flu, thus causing the events of Left 4 Dead to take place. There are other theories out there, but this is the one I found to be the most convincing in favor of this connected timeline argument. Like I said, I personally think they aren't connected in any way, they simply take place in different universes. If you agree or disagree, let me know. You guys always keep me up to date. We have now made it to the 6th layer. The tank would die very quickly IRL. This entry is a reference to the weird laws of biology/physics and whatever other real-world sciences the game breaks. Obviously, it had to break them or there would be no Left 4 Dead. But if we analyze some of the special infected with a magnifying glass, they might not be as scary as you think. This section pointed out the tank, so let's start there. The tank, a boss infected within the Left 4 Dead universe, is this huge muscular hunk of meat. It pounds its arms into the ground as it walks in order to hold up its weight. He weighs around 800 pounds and is so incredibly strong it can rip concrete out of the ground and hurl it towards its victims. Anything that big needs a lot of energy to perform such actions. No single entity has infinite energy at their disposal, thus meaning the tank would have to eat a lot to maintain its current form. However, like I said in my last video, we don't see any of the infected eating, let alone the tank. So out of curiosity, how much would the tank have to eat in order to survive? After doing some math, according to what I see online, an 800-pound animal would roughly need to consume about 11,600 calories a day to survive. Any animal that needs that much energy could not survive long enough without eating. Thus, if we apply this thinking to the tank, it would just take a few days for this thing to starve. And that's not even mentioning the lack of energy it would have leading up to its death. Take all of this with a grain of salt. I'm not a biology major, but it's something interesting I wanted to talk about. While the tank is the most obvious example, this would still apply to the other infected and the other specials, just to a varying degree. Obviously, Obviously, we don't just see tanks dying in the game, and the infection is still spreading, thus creating more tanks, so it's not like we wouldn't see them at all, just that they definitely wouldn't live very long. This next entry is titled CEDA Tapes. The CEDA Tapes is an analog horror series that uses the events of Left 4 Dead as a foundation to build a deeper horror-driven narrative. It begins from the perspective of CEDA, explaining things like how to build a safe room, why all the doors look the same, rules you should live by, etc. And as you continue watching the videos, you can clearly tell something's up. As most of the videos start with something familiar, they eventually turn way darker. It adds new special infected, like this dude who stares at you. I call him the cuck. Nah, I gotta cut that out. There are many different types of videos that tackle different aspects of the lore. However, I do have a couple gripes with the series. A long time ago on my channels, people asked me to cover this series, and I still might in a future video, but one day I sat down with a couple of my Left 4 Dead friends and we watched some of the videos. Unfortunately, we weren't that impressed. A lot of the videos misspell words or generally use incorrect grammar at times. Keep in mind, this is supposed to be from the perspective of a government agency. Not only do things like that take you out of the experience, but some of the ideas are just lacking. Like the special infected that stares at you, for example. This series mainly focuses on the horror aspect of an infected that just stares at you, but it doesn't really explain the practicality at all, which I can get. Sometimes less is more with these types of things, but because Left 4 Dead is a game that needs that level of practicality, when something like this comes along and isn't explained very well in a believable enough way, it falls short. There's also the fact that a lot of the lore implications just don't match up with some of the footage they use. For example, in the safe room video I've been talking about, they used the Blood Harvest Chapter 3 safe room, which is cool. It's a nice set piece, but this area would have been completely overrun. How does it make sense to have CEDA footage from a place like this that's so early on in the infection? The safe room wouldn't have been made, or it would have been overrun. Like, when would they have gotten this footage? Sometimes the video's subtitles just explain things that don't need explaining and would once again never come out of the mouths of this agency. I like what they're trying to do with the series. I commend them and their effort, but it's not perfect. It needs a lot of work. As I mentioned, I might make a video analyzing the entire series, but for now, that's all I have to say. Cut dialogue. This entry is pretty self-explanatory, but it's a reference to all the cut dialogue you can find and listen to in the Left 4 Dead game files. One such example of this is the amount of lore that was cut from the helicopter pilot that picks you up at the end of No Mercy. This is also the same guy, for those of you who forget, who gets shot by Zoey and crashes the helicopter at the beginning of Crash Course. There's a bunch of voice lines where the helicopter pilot explains to our survivors that there's a military safe zone up north. I'm pretty sure he's referring to Riverside, which is the safe zone that got overrun at the end of Death Toll. You can also hear him trying to tell the survivors that he tried to do a street landing, but something bad ended up happening.
Now you understand why I told you to prepare? I'm getting really cold. Hope I'm immune.
I think he even says at one point he got bit. Many have debated on whether or not to take these voice lines as canon. The biggest reason I think the voice lines were cut is because I don't think they ever found a way to incorporate it into the gameplay without slowing the narrative down. Valve just wanted the player to get right into the action, so all this exposition would be pretty hard to fit in between two campaigns. Although I would have loved more exposition, that's how Valve decided to develop the game, so that's what we got. I'm gonna keep this next entry fairly short because I talked about it in my original series, but this entry is a reference to the fact that you can find Bill within the universe of Dead by Daylight. Many theories suggest that the entity from DBD can cross into dimensions, so it's totally possible a piece of Bill survived within DBD. People told me in my comments the last time I talked about this that the entity doesn't let people escape and instead forces them to play the game over and over again, so I don't think Bill would have any chance of escaping back to our reality. That, and it's a completely different universe, so does any of this really matter? You can also find some cosmetics for the other Left 4 Dead survivors. But that's pretty much all I have to say. Let's move on. This entry is titled Zoey Didn't Have to Kill Her Dad. This entry revolves around Zoey's backstory and what she had to do to survive, or at least what she believes she had to do. Zoey is explained to be a college girl that loves zombie media, just like many of us. One day her mother comes home infected with the green flu. Her father intervenes and ends up getting bitten by the mother. Once Zoey's mom was dealt with, her father looks into her eyes and references all the zombie movies they've watched, asking her to shoot him, which she does. Later on, it's explained that the gene that makes a person person immune to the infection is passed down from their father, implying Zoey didn't actually need to kill her father. My friend Payne argues that it didn't really matter, her father was probably going to die anyways. If you take a look at his wound, there's a lot of blood. However, my counter to this argument would be the fact that her dad probably believed this despite his injuries. If he succumbed to the infection, it probably wouldn't slow him down at all, and in order to prevent that, he asked his daughter to take him out. I think the obvious implication here is that Zoey holds the burden of murdering one of her own family members, when in reality both her and her father believed that what they thought was true, so it doesn't really implicate her as being this ruthless killer. It's a pretty depressing situation to be in, but Zoey's character grows to be a very strong and diligent person, so at least she got something out of it. Left 4 Dead 3. Oh boy, where do I even go with this one? Left 4 Dead 3 would have obviously been the next installment, but did you know Valve actually did work on it at one point in time? You can find some leaked screenshots online. The screenshots depict Morocco. You can see deserts and entire levels built. Many people jumped to criticize what they saw, saying how this isn't Left 4 Dead at all, and some of the leaks suggest that it was a more open world video game in nature, so it'd be straying away from the gameplay we love. I don't know, personally the game never even came out, so how can you criticize a game that never fully came to release? I don't think a lot of people gave what they saw a fair shake, and again, this is Valve, so let's be so for real, it would have been a masterpiece. From what I understand, the last build of Left 4 Dead 3 was cancelled in 2013-2014, and Turtle Rock left in 2010, so we can at least rule out that Turtle Rock not working with them was the reason why we never got the game. From what I can tell, the main reason development stopped for Left 4 Dead 3 was because of the source engine limitations at the time. It couldn't keep up with the large open world vision they had, thus they couldn't further development. I really hope we see something one day. I think a lot of people might have misunderstood what they meant by open world, maybe like multiple branching missions and mission level design rather than just the streamline that we got in Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Maybe not like Ubisoft, GTA style of open world. I'm sure Valve would have made it interesting. Green flu is a prion. This entry suggests that instead of the green flu being something like rabies, which is a virus, it's more like mad cow disease, which is a prion. For those of you who don't know what the difference is, quote, a virus is an infectious agent containing genetic material, DNA or RNA, enclosed in a protein coat that requires a host to replicate. A prion is a misfolded infectious protein that contains no genetic material and causes disease by forcing normal proteins into a similar abnormal shape. From what I see online, if the green flu is a prion, it would be incurable, which matches up with what we see in the story. There are other aspects of the green flu being a prion that are important to know, however. For example, if you're infected with a prion, it leads to inevitable death. So I don't understand how all the infected aren't dead if the green flu is just a prion. Maybe it needs more time. Maybe it's just a not inevitable death-causing thing. I'm not too sure. Maybe I'm just looking too deep into it, but let me know what you guys think. For the last entry in today's video, we have nightmare mods. I recently did a stream where I played with a couple friends trying out the mod pack. It's pretty fun. You can find it by going on the Steam Workshop and typing in nightmare. There's like 160 something mods in the pack, so it majorly changes up the game. I really enjoy playing it. It flips the gameplay on its head and forces everyone to slow down and think. Of course, you have your super loud and outright busted infected, but it tweaks the game in a lot of ways you might not realize. For example, ammo isn't infinite. You can only pick up one gun from gun spawns, so it really focuses the gameplay on resource management instead of just using things whenever. And yes, for those of you wondering, this is where the famous Skinwalker Zoey originates from. The witch in this mod is replaced by a Skinwalker who takes the form of Zoey, talking and mumbling to herself. Be careful though, as she can wipe your entire team if she notices you. My favorite part of the mod is that it randomly puts obstacles and new holdout events within each map. It can randomly spawn new cars, force closed doors. Randomness is really incredible. The replay value is insanely high. Like I said, check it out if you haven't. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like and a comment if you did, dislike if you dislike it, and tell me anything you think I should add to the iceberg and I might just add it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this is the third part in the series covering layers 5 and 6, so check out the other parts if you haven't. But I'll probably turn all these into one large video, so if you want to just wait for that to come out, you do you. That's about all I have for you guys today. Have a nice rest of your day. Peace out.